Even though an insecure Donald Trump has been abruptly canceling interviews left, right, and center, for some stupid reason, he kept an interview at the Economic Club of Chicago, where he was grilled directly about his economic policy, and it was as disastrous as you can imagine, with Trump ranging from incoherent to visibly triggered, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video, and I'm quite frankly stunned. Not because Trump was incoherent, that's expected, not because he was visibly triggered, that's also to be expected. What I'm stunned about is that as he's canceling 60-minute interviews and CNBC interviews and refusing rematches with Kamala Harris on Fox News, that he agreed to keep this particular interview where an economist or an economic journalist was going to grill him about the nuances and particulars of his economic policy, which Trump cannot answer. Trump has never been able to answer, and Trump never will be able to answer. This is staggering stuff. So we're going to play some of these clips, and then we're going to do, courtesy of a visual aid, which I personally found very helpful. Sometimes I'm a visual learner, kind of explaining the dangers posed by Trump's tariff the hell out of everything economic policy. But before we get into that, here are some of the clips. Brace yourselves.
You move too quick. No, you got to be able to finish a thought because it's very important. You know, this is big stuff we're talking about. You can't go that quickly.
You've gone from the dollar to
So let me just tell you. So I said, no, I'm just telling you basic. It's called the weave. It's all these different things happening. Yeah. So let me just say. So I said to Mnuchin.
So again, that's Trump in a single 20-second clip going from furious to incoherent to try to justify. It's called the weave. Because the journalist, I don't know if you heard it, said, you just went from the dollar to Emmanuel Macron. What are you talking about? There's no coherence there. It's called the weave, right? Because he thinks that this is some sort of brilliant rhetorical or communicative strategy that is celebrated by Harvard professors, even though it's categorically ridiculous. Donald Trump is just an incoherent lunatic, and that's why he's unable to maintain a single thought. And if you heard, the audience laughed at him, right? He's so clownish. With that in mind, here's another clip.
You heard the reception there. The business people of Chicago, like everywhere else, they like a lot of the things you want to do in terms of tax cuts and some of the spending proposals. But like many business people, what they're often worried about is the cost. And the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, which is a bipartisan outfit, put out some predictions the other day. If you add up all the promises you've made, and your plans would add $7.5 trillion to the debt. That's more than twice the total for Vice President Harris. You're on course to push up debt up to 150% of GDP. This is a very business-like audience. Why should they trust you with that?
Because we're about growth. She's got no growth whatsoever. And we're all about growth. We're going to bring companies back to our country. You look at even today, as I was driving over, I see these empty, old, beautiful, steel mills and factories that are empty and falling down. Some have been converted to senior citizens' homes, but that's not going to do the trick. And we're going to bring the companies back. We're going to lower taxes still further for companies that are going to make their product in the USA. We're going to protect those companies with strong tariffs, because I'm a believer in tariffs. I'm not sure that you are. I don't think you are, but I congratulate you on your career. But to me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff. And it's my favorite word. It needs a public relations firm to help it. But to me, it's the most beautiful word in the dictionary.
Tariffs, do you think that will bring in the revenues? To use another bipartisan group,
yeah,
Petulant Institute, they say they only bring in $200 billion. That is that's barely the cost of two of your promises.
Yeah, but that's for what company are you talking about, okay? Look, I brought in with tariffs, and I was just getting started. Then COVID came, and we had because I tell you what, I did a very good job in COVID. Nobody knew what the hell it was. I call it the China virus because I like.
Right. So there you go. A couple of things. Again, it would be commensurate. Again, the speculation, the reports that Trump's tariff proposals would add nearly $8 trillion to the debt. That actually makes sense because Donald Trump did add $8 trillion to the national debt when he was president, the single greatest contribution in a 4-year term. He said he would not only not add to the debt, that he would actually wipe out all the debt he'd inherited from his predecessors. And instead, he added $8 trillion in 4 years. a greater contribution by far than a single-term president. And so now he's on track to do it again should he take back the White House. Totally commensurate. I also think it's funny he talks about how so many Chicago buildings have been converted to senior assisted living homes. He sounds like he should be in one, as a matter of fact, rather than pursuing the White House again. And also, again, just adopting a very adversarial tone with the moderator. I think the best word in the English language is tariff. But as the moderator points out, at best, it looks like he would only get $200 billion of revenue from tariffs. But as a consequence, would add in terms of debt $8 trillion. It's a staggering asymmetry there. But of course, Trump doesn't want to deal with reality when instead he can deal in fiction, like when he talks about his revisionist history with respect to COVID. I handled COVID great. About 500,000 people died on Trump's watch by the time he left the presidency. And as a consequence of the disastrous policies he set forth, the attitude of skepticism, both about the virus and then the subsequent vaccine, 1 million people died total. And the people who were more likely to die were Trump supporters because they were less likely to get the vaccine. So the rates of infection and death among Trump supporters exceeded those of Democrats. Really staggering stuff. Another clip.
On things you don't really like. You're also talking about 20% tariffs on the rest of the world. That is going to have a serious effect on the overall economy. And yes, you're going to find some people who will gain from individual tariffs. The overall effect could be massive in terms of the economy.
I agree it's going to have a massive effect, positive effect. It's going to be a positive, not a negative.
Well,
let me just I know how committed you are to this, and it must be hard for you to spend 25 years talking about tariffs as being negative and then have somebody explain to you that you're totally wrong. It'll have a negative. It will have. I'll go a step further. If you don't do this, this country has no chance.
40 million jobs is a lot of jobs to rely on.
They're all coming back.
Those are 40 million jobs. Those are 40 million jobs in America that rely on trade.
Are you ready, John?
On things.
So again, people laughing at Trump, explaining to an economic journalist, that Trump somehow has a better grasp of this when the vast majority of economists, including conservative economists who really want Trump to do well, are like, this is insane. This, maximal tariff position and policy that Trump is subscribing to, that he is just like seems, almost, stubbornly committed to for some ridiculous reason. But again, another clip.
To mention
no, but
Putin,
these are big things. I have to mention them.
Yeah, you just mentioned Putin, though, and this has been this controversy of the past week. Can you say yes or no whether you have talked to Vladimir Putin since you stopped being president?
Well, I don't comment on that, but I will tell you that if I did, it's a smart thing. If I'm friendly with people, if I have a relationship with people, that's a good thing, not a.
So it's potentially a really bad thing. Not only is it potentially a really bad thing, it's potentially unlawful because the Logan Act prohibits private citizens, including former presidents, from conducting foreign policy. Now, if the current president of the United States enlists a former president to participate, as an envoy to another country, that's different because then they are enacting the wishes and agenda of the current sitting president. That happens all the time. Republican and Democratic administrations have made use of former Republican and Democratic presidents and officials to maintain special diplomatic relationships. But these people are working in conjunction and on behalf of the current president. Donald Trump is not the current president, and he's certainly not working on behalf of President Biden or Vice President Harris. So he is in potential violation of the Logan Act. I should say that Bob Woodward, who recently released a book called War, it's actually at the time of recording, it's out today. According to interviews and reports and investigation, Trump has had at least 7 phone calls with Vladimir Putin. Now, the Kremlin has denied this, but it's interesting that when Trump is asked about it, like, hey, can you say yes or no? Trump won't say yes or no. What would have been smart is if he backed up what the Kremlin said and said, no, of course not. I haven't talked to Putin. But this seems to be Trump's cognitive decline getting in the way of probably saner judgment, right? Because he can't even say no. Sounds like it's a tacit admission that he has been in touch with Putin and is simply trying to justify it instead. Ridiculous stuff. Another clip.
She came out, she just said, The Green New Scam. She just named all these things.
President Trump, the issue at the markets are looking at the fact you are making all these promises. Latest one was car loans. You're flooding the thing with giving giveaways.
But we're going to grow.
I was actually quite kind to you. I used 7 trillion. The upper estimate is 15 trillion. People like the Wall Street Journal, who's hardly a communist organization,
yeah, but you don't know.
They have criticized you on this as well. You are running up enormous debts.
What does the Wall Street Journal know? I'm meeting with them tomorrow. What does the Wall Street Journal know? They've been wrong about everything. So have you, by the way. You've been wrong about
You're trying to turn this. You're trying to turn this.
You've been wrong about it.
No, you're trying to turn this into debate. There are business people. There are business
you're wrong.
people.
You've been wrong. You've been wrong all your life on this stuff. You've been. She came out.
Did you see how petulant that was? Look at the body language there. Like a teenager instead of a 78-year-old man who used to be the most powerful man on earth. Like, just, it's staggering. Look at this. Look, this guy's a teenager. He really is. And he has some sycophants in the audience who are clapping along to it. But the fact of the matter is that Trump has no basis, none, for his economic vision with respect to tariffs. It's absolutely insane. There is no credible economist who is backing Trump in this respect. The last clip I want to play before we get to the tariff thing, again, courtesy of visual aid, which, again, I find very helpful, and I hope some of you may as well. This is a fun, petty one. This is what Trump has to say. Listen.
Because, you put them in the young. You tend to put them in young. Only stupid people put old. You don't put old in.
I think that is a perfect summation of how people should vote in this upcoming election. Don't put old in. Donald Trump is the oldest presidential candidate in American history. You should probably put young or at least younger in and vote for Kamala Harris. So CNN has a good breakdown, 3 charts. Again, sometimes it helps me to have a visual aid to compute and to comprehend these things. 3 charts that would help explain how Trump's tariffs would work. If former President Donald Trump returns to the White House, tariffs will once again play a major role in his policy agenda. Trump has repeatedly said he plans to impose an across-the-board tariff of either 10 or 20% on every import coming into the United States, as well as a tariff upward of 60% on all Chinese imports, in a bid to encourage American manufacturing. By the way, American manufacturing higher under the Biden-Harris administration than it ever was under the Trump administration. Quote, tariffs are the greatest things ever invented, Trump said last month at a town hall. But as with many economic policies, there are trade-offs, and Trump doesn't talk about the negative effect tariffs could have on U.S. businesses and consumers. He's also often falsely described how tariffs work. Vice President Harris has referred to her opponent's tariff policy as a Trump tax. Several independent studies have found that the new tariffs, if implemented, would raise costs for the average middle-class family, with estimates ranging between $1,350 and nearly $4,000, $3,900 a year. Here are 3 charts to help explain the impact of tariffs. To illustrate how tariffs affect the American businesses and consumers, imagine this scenario involving a fictitious foreign shoe manufacturer called Worldwide Shoes. Foreign manufacturer produces goods to be sold to the U.S. Worldwide Shoes produces a variety of sneakers, dress shoes, and sandals outside of the U.S. Okay? Shoes are shipped to the U.S. where they face a tariff. The U.S. places a 20% tariff on each pair of shoes. Companies based in the U.S. pay the tariff to the U.S. Treasury. U.S. Sneakers, an American company that purchases from Worldwide Shoes, pays for the total cost of the imported shoes plus the tariff. A $100 pair of shoes now costs U.S. Sneakers $120 because there's a 20% tariff. The U.S. company now has a few options to make up for this increased cost. Number 1, the company eats the cost of the tariff. U.S. Sneakers decides to keep the price it charges for its shoes the same. The company is making a smaller profit and may have less money to pay its workers or invest in expansion, for example. That's one option. Option 2, company passes along some of the cost of the tariff to the buyer. U.S. Sneakers raises the price of the shoes by $10, covering half of the $20 tariff. That's one option. Second option. The third option is the company passes along the cost of the tariff to the buyer, the total. U.S. Sneakers raises the price of the shoes by $20 to make up for what it paid for the tariff. In options 2 and 3, American consumer pays a higher price. On store shelves, the shoes could cost up to $20 more than they did before the tariff was put in place. Again, just an easy example to conceptualize how this works. That is why most economists, not just liberal economists, but conservative economists who want Trump to win are like, please don't talk about tariffs and please walk this policy back, because it will almost certainly result in U.S. consumers paying considerably higher costs. So I'm not sure why Donald Trump agreed to keep that interview at the U.S. Economic Club of Chicago, but there we are. It's absolute nonsense. Again, he ranged from incoherent to evasive to dishonest to outright triggered. And as we get closer and closer to the election, I have to imagine if he wants to win, he should try to reduce the instances of these appearances rather than maximize them. Pretty glaring oversight from he and his staff. So interesting stuff. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.